This week's reading is from Rays of the One Light, weekly commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. Last week we asked the question, why do devotees fall? And we considered the downfall of Judas in this context. Jesus, in answer to Judas's criticism for allowing Mary to rub his feet with spikenard, a very costly ointment, said, "The poor always ye have with you, but me ye have not always." Jesus is saying here that there is one supreme injustice that needs eradication. Poverty, yes, but not of a material kind. Poverty in a spiritual sense. Divine blessings are not common in this world. They are extraordinary. When they come, we should give them priority above every other consideration. Never allow a moment of inner joy, for instance, to be set aside for lesser duties. Divine attunement is our highest priority. As Lahiri Mahashai, the guru of Yogananda's guru, said, "To listen to the heart's inner sound, Om, which issues from the very center of our being, is man's highest duty." Mary on this occasion was not communing in inner silence with Christ's Spirit, as she had been when Martha urged Jesus to reproach her for not helping out in the kitchen. Mary this time was serving outwardly, but in a very different spirit from the restless fussing for which Jesus had reprimanded her sister Martha. Those who see a radical difference between the paths of action and meditation should understand this distinction. To serve in the right spirit is necessary, for only thereby can we overcome our karmic tendencies towards restless activity. The important thing is that the spirit be always inwardly focused, that in everything we do we act in loving service to the Lord. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita says in the 3rd chapter, "The state of freedom from action, that is, of eternal rest in the spirit, cannot be attained without action. No one by mere renunciation and outward non-involvement can attain perfection." Whenever the Spirit of God descends upon you, however, remember the words of Jesus, "Me ye have not always with you." Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Good morning, friends. So this is a beautiful topic and an important topic this morning, talking about how we can have our activity also be spiritualized and also have that activity draw us more and more toward our ultimate freedom in God. So I'll read this beautiful little, these are whispers from eternity. They're prayer demands, Master called them, that we make to God. And he wrote these for almost every occasion, every mood, every difficulty that we have. He has a prayer demand. And so this is the prayer demand. "Bless me that I may perceive thee through the window of all activities. Bless me that I may perceive thee through the windows of all joyous activities. Look upon me and cheer me always as I engage in my daily duties. Let my every action, whether waking, sleeping, or dreaming, be sprayed by the fountain of thy presence." It's not only a beautiful poem, prayer poem, or prayer demand, but it helps to give us the key that we need to turn our activity also. Master said that activity, meditation should be like quiet activity, and activity should be active meditation. And so Swami one time visited a man in Vancouver, a businessman, and stayed at his house. And the man came home after work, 5 o'clock or 5:30, whatever it was. And then he said, "Oh, and now my real day can begin," because he was then going to go to meditate. And it sounds like a beautiful sentiment, but as many beautiful sentiments are, completely wrong. Swami said, how sad that your day begins after your time at the office. Why don't you include God in your activity? Why don't you fill all your time with thoughts of God, or at least offering to God? Now, it isn't really possible in today's modern world to have all of our thoughts be of God. It might be possible in some kinds of activities that are very repetitive and don't demand a whole lot of attention, to be thinking constantly of God while you do that. But if you're trying to do computer programming or running a complex machine or driving on a freeway, thinking of God while you're doing that, splitting your consciousness, multitasking, is not going to be productive. And so what Master said is that what we should do is that we should begin and end each day with deep meditation. Also have a meditation in between, if that's possible, 1 or 2. And then throughout the day, do our task. Do it well. Do it with deep concentration. But think of God as often as we can. There are hundreds of opportunities during the day to turn our mind toward God. You know, when you're standing in line at the checkout line at the grocery store, you don't have to be checking your phone or fuming about something that happened earlier in the day, or looking at the National Enquirer and wondering whether Cher really did meet Elvis. You can turn your mind more and more in those spaces, which there are hundreds of them during the day. You can train your mind to turn toward God. And so keep the Master said in his beautiful poem, the spotlight, God, God, God is the poem. The spotlight of my mind ever keeps turning toward thee. It's a beautiful phrase and a beautiful affirmation and a beautiful piece of advice for life. The spotlight of my mind ever keeps turning. Well, why does it have to turn? Well, it's been turned away. And so it has to turn back. And so, in fact, we need the spotlight of our mind to be focused on our workspace if our workspace demands attention. But then, when it doesn't demand attention, then we can turn the spotlight of my mind ever keeps turning toward thee. And in the battle din of activity, my silent war cry will be God, God, God. The next stanza. When storms of trials shriek, and when worries howl at me, I will drown their noises loudly chanting, God, God, God. So keep turning our minds back toward God as often as possible. And we can train. This is a trainable trait in us, something that we can learn to do. And so we just need to keep working at turning our minds back toward God. Now, in the rhythm, in a longer rhythm, we can say, keep your mind turned back toward God. But without meditation, you aren't going to have the centeredness that is necessary to do that. And so here in this beautiful passage, Mary is rubbing the feet of Jesus with this costly ointment. Now, that isn't just a random act. In the East especially, touching the feet of the Guru or touching the feet even of your parents as a sign of respect, is something that a person thinks of as receiving blessing from that. And so the Master writes in the autobiography that whenever he touched the feet of his guru, it was as if an electric thrill ran through his body. And so here Mary is not just doing some nice activity, she's communing through that activity with her God, with Jesus. Now, Jesus was a person, and a person has feet. That's why I did the chant, engrossed is the bee of my mind on the blue lotus feet of my divine mother. And so we can think of our minds constantly trying to turn and be engrossed and touch the feet of Divine Mother. But as I say, Jesus was a person in a body, and that body had feet, and therefore there could be a physical activity. But the deeper symbol and the more important symbol is that Jesus represents Christ consciousness. And Christ consciousness is always with us, but is hidden. And so if we, in deep meditation, turn our minds toward communing, toward offering ourselves, toward somehow doing an act of devotion to the Christ consciousness, it isn't as if we're giving up something, we're receiving something in that. And that really, devotion and self-offering to God is the highest activity. The dissolving of the ego is the highest activity. That's why in this passage that we heard, Lahiri Mahashaya said that man's highest duty is to listen to the inner sound of Om. Om brings things into manifestation. Listening to Om brings things out of manifestation. And so if we have an ego which has been brought into manifestation, if we listen to Om, it draws that ego out of manifestation. And so any deep activity trying to commune with God, Master defined meditation as deep concentration on God or on one of His qualities. And so listening to Om, sound is one of God's qualities. Listening to Om with concentration is a kind of meditation. We even have that technique of the Om technique. But communing with God in any aspect of God, where our mind is deeply concentrated, worshiping, needing the feet of God, engrossed is the bee of my mind on the blue lotus feet of my Divine Mother. If we start our day with that kind of activity to the very best of our ability, so we start our day with deep, engrossed consciousness on God, then try to have a little time of a bridge when you finish meditation. Have a bridge. So maybe you've finished meditation and you're walking. Let's say that you live in the community and there's a group meditation. You've finished the meditation and now you're walking back to your apartment. Well, make that transition between sitting still and moving. Make that transition a bridge to hold on to that consciousness and carry it with you. So continue your meditation as a walking meditation. Then if you're going to make breakfast, have a breakfast meditation, a making breakfast meditation. And then when you're going to eat, have that be a part of the connection with God. Thou art the food, and when I break my fast, I will taste thee and mentally say, God, God, God. So when we eat, the food, really the very food that we eat, is made up of God consciousness in solidified form. And if we remind ourselves of that, then we make that divine connection. And so on through the day, so that as we go through the day, having made a deep connection, built a bridge into activity from that connection, and then reminding ourselves as often as we can throughout the day to turn our mind, the spotlight of our mind, back toward God in whatever form appeals to you. And it doesn't have to be formal. It can be chanting, it can be smiling at someone, it can be anything that seeing a picture of Master. You know, most of us have multiple pictures of Master in our houses or in places. When we walk past that picture, why not make a little mental connection? In the autobiography, we read about this beautiful soul, Master Mahashaya, a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. And if you remember, there's a scene where he and Master are walking, and he sees a fountain, and he sits to meditate for a little while. And he said, my Master Ramakrishna told me that whenever I see a body of water, I should stop and think of God and meditate a while. So we can use these little kind of memory tricks. See, it isn't that we don't want to think of God. Most of us would love to think of God all the time, but we forget to do it. It's the forgetfulness, the loss of kind of, I don't know, we get spaced out, but not in the right spaced out. You know, there's a meditative spaced out, and there's a wandering through life, being mindful of what we're doing at that moment. And so keep turning the mind back toward God, especially in those little gaps during the day. And then at night, before we go to bed, again, make that deep connection. So if we have the bookends of our day, the beginning first thing when you get up, Devi and I have a little photo of Master, beautiful photo, one of our favorite, on the wall opposite our beds. And when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is I say, good morning, Master, mentally. Sounds a little weird if you do it out loud. But, you know, we can be weird too, that's okay. But, good morning, Master. And so that begins the day with my first conscious thought, my waking thought, to be connected with my source of inspiration. Then early meditation, first thing in the morning meditation, last thing at night should be some meditation. And Swami suggests that as we go into sleep, that we mentally think of God and offer everything that we think that we own, that we think that we have, that we think that we are. They're all delusions, because all we are really is light and sound and joy and love. That's who we are. But we think we're something else. Think we're a man or a woman with a certain occupation and so on. And we think we own things. And we don't really. Everything we have is not only belongs to God, is God. And so to remind ourselves by offering that back in, Swami says to visualize the heart as either a fire or as a golden globe. If it's a fire, then you offer all those things in so that it burns up attachments. If it's a globe, he said to think of each little attachment, each little delusion as a string coming from that golden globe, and you clip it off and then you polish the globe so that it's completely free. But have the bookends, the morning and evening, a deep connection with God, and then think of God as often as you can during the intervening hours, and that kind of activity will then free us from the karmic delusions that we have built up and burn up the seeds of karma that keep us from knowing our own true self.
Good morning, everyone. And I also want to thank all of you for this wonderful weekend we've shared together. And so many of you worked very, very hard on multiple levels. I won't describe them all, but it's been a joy to be here. And we are already planning our next trip, the next July 2018. And so we look forward to that. You're very fortunate to have a place like this to come to. They're rare in this world we live in. So our topic, as Jyotish has been speaking, and as we've heard in the passage, how devotees rise. And Yogananda came on so many levels with a spiritual revolution. He broke through all barriers, forms. You know, when he was sent to the West from India, his guru, Swami Shri Yukteswar, and our line of gurus, one of our avatars, Babaji, said, "We have chosen you to go to the West and spread the message of Kriya Yoga to thirsty souls in the West." And that's all of us. What were we thirsty for? We were thirsty for peace. We were thirsty for knowledge, true knowledge. We were thirsty for what is reality. No one seems to know anything. Talk about fake news. I mean, you know, it's all, everything we're taught is not really the truth until you come to the wisdom of someone who knows reality. Like these great avatars, great saints of all religions. We're not saying ours is the only way. Buddha taught it, Muhammad taught it, Moses taught it, Christ taught it. The heads of all great religions, they're sharing the same truth. And so, and what is that truth? That we are, as we said yesterday, we are made in the image of God, that His qualities, His infinite love, His unfailing compassion and wisdom and joy and power, they are who we really are. But what Yogananda did when he was about to leave India to come to America, his guru said, "Forget that you were born a Hindu, but don't become an American. Find a new expression." And that's what he did. And part of that new expression, and it hasn't really been done for many, many centuries in the religious life, the spiritual life, he said, our path is one of meditation and service. And even the word Kriya, Yoga, Kriya is the highest meditation technique that Master brought to the West. Kriya simply means action. So it's action and meditation. And our lifelong teacher and Ananda's founder, Swami Kriyananda, when we say Swami, we're always referring, for those of you who are new, to Swami Kriyananda. He chose that name. Ananda means bliss, Kriya, joy through action and through deep meditation. And that's what Master brought. That was different. Because there are many, many, throughout his recorded history, religious paths that say withdraw from the world, be contemplative, just forget the problems of humanity. You just go inside, go into a cave, go into a monastery, a cell, and you just pray. And that's all you need to do to find God. And then there are other paths that say, Look at the suffering in the world. We have to act. We have to help people. But it's one or the other. Master said both. Both. And so how devotees rise is to bring both of those aspects. We start, as Jyotish was saying, with such inspiration and clarity, drawing God into our life all the time, but from that awareness of God, then to act, then to bring that action out into the world, and then it's infused with God's power and God's presence. And you don't, daily, Christ said in the Bible, sufficient unto the day are the evils thereof. Well, we can talk, what does that mean? It means, it has many meanings as the words of all great masters, but he was saying in part, you don't need to go and, beat yourself up and do penance and all that as part of the religious life. Your own karma will come to you, and it'll bring sufficient suffering. You don't have to go out and looking for it. But it also means sufficient unto the day. Our daily life, if we go deep in God, we can find God there in what we're doing. When I've shared this with some of you, but when, Jyotish and I are married and we have a grown son and grandchildren, but when I was a young mother, part of being a young mother is huge amounts of laundry. And I was never drawn to homemaking, and so I had all this laundry to fold, and I hated it. I just hated it. And then I thought, you're wasting a lot of time resisting this. It is part of your life. And so I just thought, this is my mission from God. And I meant it. I mean, I wasn't just being facetious with myself. God has put this huge pile of laundry right in front of me, and he is saying, this is what I want you to do. And I began approaching it instead of, oh, what difference does it make? No, I'm going to do this the best I can. And I began folding things carefully and putting them in neat piles, and I began feeling so joyful. It totally changed the experience. So life, let's face it, there's so much not very interesting, redundant activities that we have to do. And we can either say, what a waste, or we can say, what a joy. And it depends on the quality of the energy we bring to it. And that's why Jyotish was saying, start with meditation and then bring that energy into whatever it is you're doing. Concentration, calmness, peace, and that will bring joy to you. I remember, I may have shared this story, but many years ago when Swami Kriyananda was just moving into the Crystal Hermitage where his home was, the interior wasn't yet painted. And there were a group of us having breakfast in the dining room, and he said, oh, does anyone want to come and help me paint the inside of my house? So of course we all dropped everything we were doing and went over to help him paint. And the job I had it was a geodesic dome, and it has a huge hexagonal window, and there were these wooden beams all framing it and then coming down, and I had to get up on a ladder and scaffolding, but my job was to paint those beams. They were rough wood and I was staining them. And so we started in the morning and we got a certain amount done, and then Swami was painting too. He was younger in those days, and he said, okay, let's take a break for lunch. So we did, and then we came back after lunch, and I could feel, it was such a, I still remember and can feel the feeling of it. He was so concentrated in what he was doing that he drew all of us into that heightened concentration. It was just like our minds were like laser beams, and we were just painting and painting and painting. And then finally he said, okay, it's been a good day. We're almost done, but let's just knock off and we can finish tomorrow. And I looked at my clock. We'd started after lunch, maybe 1:30, my watch, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning. And we had just painted all afternoon, all night. We hadn't stopped for dinner. But I felt totally energized and totally joyful Because it wasn't, so you can say, well, were you thinking about God? I can't say that I was, but I was sure concentrated. Absolutely. There weren't any other thoughts in my mind. And so to inactivity, that focused attention, giving your whole self to whatever it is you're doing. And again, daily life, if you're cooking, you can slap things together, or you can infuse it with energy. You can infuse it with love, with joy, with beauty. You know, some years ago, I had the wonderful experience. The Ananda High School goes on regularly on field trips. This is from Ananda Village to an orphanage in Mexico, and they serve there for 2 weeks. They live with the orphans. They save up money all year long to bring toys and clothes to the children. And I was one of the adults that accompanied them. And it was such a marvelous experience because you saw these little children, and I was expecting, this orphanage, they're going to be so sad and lonely. It was such a joyful place. It was like one great big family, hundreds of kids. They had one priest and 3 nuns, and that was the only ones that took care of them. But we were helping, and we were helping in the kitchen, and there was one little old lady who did all the cooking, and there was like a pot of beans like that big on this burner. And so my job was to stir the beans, and it was in this little room with no windows, no ventilation. There was one little light bulb hanging. And I have to say there were cockroaches everywhere. And so I was stirring, and then I kind of straightened up and put my hand on the counter. And I looked, and there were all these cockroaches running up my arm. But it was very hot, but I was just stirring and stirring. And I was trying to put love into that big pot of beans that the orphans were going to eat. And I'm not saying I'm anybody special. I'm not. Please accept that in me. But I was so moved by being able, it wasn't pleasant, it wasn't fun, but I was so grateful to be able to be infusing love into these beans that these children would eat, that tears were just pouring down my face because I was so grateful that I could do that. And so when you're cooking for your family, when you're fixing the broken window in your home, whatever it is, if you do it with the sense that I'm doing this with love, I'm doing this for God, and it changes everything. It changes every aspect of your life. You can go through life blind, just doing this, doing that, or you can go through life with your eyes open. And whatever I do, I'm going to be infusing this with God. And why? I mean, you're saying, well, I'm kind of busy. Why should I be thinking about God all the time? Because then we're happy. It's simple. It's as simple as that. There's so much more joy in life if you do it with God. Whatever you're doing, put love into it, as though God were blessing that food or whatever it might be. And then in those kind of empty spaces when you're waiting in the line, again, I had a wonderful experience with this. Life just can be so much fun if you're experimenting with bringing God into your life. So this was at Christmas time, 2 years ago. And I wanted to buy this little game for my grandchildren that I had seen at someone else's house and I thought they would like. I went all over the local area we live, Grass Valley, Nevada City. I couldn't find this game. And Christmas time, the lines were long, everybody was busy. And so I said, okay, well, it's too late. It's not going to happen. And then I had one last stop at a drugstore. And the lines were very long, but there was this one line that was really bad because there was a lady at the front. She was a very hassled young single mom, And she had a little baby, and the baby was just screaming, a toddler, and losing it, and it just, everybody was kind of moving away, and she couldn't find her wallet, and it was just a chaotic scene. And I just thought, okay, that's my line. And I went behind her, and I just started praying for her. I just thought, Lord, let her find peace. Let this child be calmed down. And I didn't make a big deal about it. It wasn't, I just was inwardly trying to ask God to bless this troubled scene. And they eventually kind of calmed down and left. And then my eyes were sort of half closed as I was waiting in line. And then I opened my eyes, and the lady was ready to check me out. And there, right in front of me, was this game I had been looking for all over town. And I said, is that for sale? And the lady said, yeah, somebody else found it, and then they didn't want it, and they left it here. And I thought, oh my God. And that's the magic of living that way, where it's like life becomes this incredible game. And you give a little bit to God, and He says, I heard that. I heard those prayers you were doing for the other person. Here's what you were looking for. And it's for everybody. And that's what Master came to show us. Bring God, meditate, develop your devotion, deepen your devotion, rest in the stillness of God. But then, in everything you do, just play with the presence of God. It's a joyful thing. It's not a kind of, okay, I've got to do this. But it's a joyful thing, and it's fun. And life, Master has a beautiful poem. I believe it's not in Whispers. I believe it's in Songs of the Soul, where it's called Hello, Playmate. And hello, Playmate, I am here. And God is our playmate. He's the sweetest, most tender friend, always there, waiting for us, just waiting for us to say, Lord, let's play. This day, let's play together. We'll play in meditation, we'll play in activity, we'll play in rest, we'll play through each other, through my friends and family. And this is what Master brought, the spiritual revolution, that God is a God of joy, and the path to Him is through deepening our awareness of His presence in our heart, and then just living with His joy in everything we do. So, God bless.